What is going on, Bama Insider Nation? You're watching Alabama Crimson Tide football recruiting with Andrew Bone, 18-plus year veteran in the industry. You can follow him on Twitter at Andrew J. Bone as we get into the show tonight, guys. Be sure to follow Bama Insider on Twitter as well, at Bama Insider. Hit the like button, get in the comment section. Hope we get you guys as regulars every week. And if you have not already subscribed to the channel, be sure to do that as well. Get that bell going so you can be notified when we go live and we post videos just like this. As Bone, we get into another week of recruiting, maybe the biggest weekend of the entire year this past weekend. Arch Manning, the #1 recruit in the country, was in town, as well as many others on their official visits. Going to talk about some 2023 guys today. Going to talk about some guys that will be visiting, coming to camps throughout the rest of the month. But as we get the show started tonight, how are you doing?
I'm good. We're at the halfway point of the month. After we've 3 weeks ago, summer camp season started. We saw a lot of kids that came into camp. We've seen a lot of official visitors the last 2 weeks. Many of Alabama's top targets. Some guys that probably have moved up the recruiting board. Some that have moved down the recruiting board, and we're going to continue to see more players visit over the course of the next couple weekends. With Alabama hosting official visits this weekend, they're also going to have an O-line, D-line camp. There's a high school 7-on-7 camp also going on in Tuscaloosa this weekend. And then next week, have more camps, final week of official visits. And Alabama will also have a cookout next week. So they'll, probably have a lot of, not necessarily, you look at the guys who've come in already for official visits this month. Most of those guys won't be back in town just to come in for the cookout. Now you'll see the official visits, the official visitors that are coming in town. They'll be at that event. You'll also probably see some in-state kids, some local guys that may not be on official visits elsewhere might also come in. They don't really promote it as this big event. I know there's some schools that you got to be here on this particular weekend because this is the biggest weekend of the year. Alabama doesn't really do that. They have these cookouts, but as long as they can get kids on campus during the month for official visits, or even if it's during the season, that's really kind of what matters to them. And so far, they've had a vast majority of top targets on campus this month. We're going to see more that are going to visit over the course of the next couple of weeks. And, we'll see if, and I'm sure we will see some more offers get extended, especially after some of these camps, because we've seen some great performances in Alabama's camps so far this summer. Some guys that we weren't even talking about. And we talked about this, before camp started. We said there are going to be guys that we have not mentioned. There are going to be guys that don't have big offers that are in the 2023 recruiting class who are going to come in, who are going to show out, who are going to earn offers from Alabama. And that's exactly what has transpired so far. And we're going to continue to see more of the same over the course of the next few weeks. Everyone always just assumes, well, you offer a kid must mean at a certain position, it must mean that the other guy that has been higher on the recruiting board for the last few months is going elsewhere. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that they finally got a chance to evaluate these kids, see them in person, and those guys move up the recruiting board. And like I said earlier, there's always guys who are also going to move down. We saw Amari Niblack, Kobe Prentice earn offers from Alabama last summer. We saw some guys that are currently in Alabama, that signed with Alabama last year that moved up the board after their performance. And there was a lot of guys who signed elsewhere who were top priorities for Alabama before they came to camp. They didn't have committable offers after they left. So that's kind of the same situation that has happened with some guys who have visited, this summer.
Yeah, it's really been a great summer so far. Like you said, getting to learn about these stories, guys we weren't thinking about as much, coming to the surface now. And some big names making their official visits as well. Going to get into that. Going to talk about some commitments as we start out the show tonight. But I want to start with a couple of guys, in-state guys, that have now announced their commitment dates. Monday is going to be the day for Wilkin Formby, the offensive lineman. He's limited down to Oklahoma now, Ole Miss, Alabama, along with Tennessee. And Bone, I hope you've had the chance to take your breath through all of this. I know these are some of the craziest weekends of the year for you. But as we talk about these in-state guys, Wilkin Formby, along with Peter Woods, who is set his announcement date as well for July the 8th, including Clemson, Florida, Jackson State, and Alabama. Where does the Crimson Tide stand in all of this? Can they get both in-state guys to commit?
I think, as far as if you're just a casual Alabama fan or a casual recruiting fan, I should say, and you look at Alabama's commitment board, you only see 4 commitments, and you're wondering, why does Alabama only have 4 commitments? Well, most of their targets have not decided. Most of their guys have decided that they wanted to take their official visits this month before making that decision. So I've been saying for a while that we're going to see a lot of commitments that are going to happen in the month of July, month of August, after these guys get finished with their official visits. Guys just don't take official visits and then commit right on the spot anymore. They want to take all their visits, enjoy the process, and then make that decision. So that's kind of what we're seeing right now. But we did see 2 in-state recruits announce their commitment dates this week, and we'll start with Wilkin Formby since he's going to be announcing on Monday. This is a guy who is an in-state kid for Alabama, local lineman from Tuscaloosa, a lot of connections in the city. And his grandfather was a punter at Alabama. And this is a guy that has a really strong connection with the Alabama offensive line coach, Eric Wolford. Coach Wolford offered him during his time up at Kentucky. And that's really what drove Wilkin to make a trip up to Kentucky, because of his relationship with Coach Wolford. Now Coach Wolford, the offensive line coach at Alabama, has really been on him ever since he arrived in Tuscaloosa. Alabama has stepped up its recruiting efforts in Wilkin over the course of the last few months, and he's visited Tuscaloosa several times. There's a lot of speculation that Ole Miss is the favorite for him and that he's going to end up going there and doing something a little bit different. I just don't buy it. This is a guy that Alabama wants. They've really pushed hard for him. He's coming off an official visit to Alabama this past weekend, and then deciding to set up a commitment date. I think it bodes well for Alabama. Could he potentially end up at Ole Miss? Possibly. But I think with a in-state kid, an in-the-city kid for Alabama, it's going to be tough for him to say no to the Crimson Tide, especially with them making a big push for him. The need for offensive linemen. We've been saying for a while, Alabama's looking to sign 5 offensive linemen in this recruiting class. They're currently sitting at 0. So that if they lost a Tuscaloosa kid to Ole Miss, they would be really not necessarily really just confused and upset, but they wouldn't be too happy. They really want this kid. I think Wilkin's going to end up at Alabama, and he's committing on Monday. I don't think it's going to be Tennessee. I don't think it's going to be Oklahoma. I do think it's between Alabama and Ole Miss, and in the end, I like the Tide's chances. And I guess the second guy we'll talk about is Peter Woods. I mean, we've talked about Peter Woods on this show for the last 2 years at least. He's been recruited by Alabama for such a long time. I mean, he was offered, as a freshman at Thompson High School. He's been, a top priority for the Crimson Tide, really since day one of his recruitment. He's been to Tuscaloosa several times, and a lot of those visits were unannounced. He was just going down to campus, spend time with the coaching staff, spend time with the players. Got a lot of really close friends on the team. His cousin Amari Kite, Alabama lineman, Jeremiah Alexander, one of his best friends. These guys have been all over him about going to Alabama. There's been a lot of Clemson talk with Peter Woods over the course of the last few weeks after his official visit to Clemson. And I do think that Clemson has made up a lot of ground. I think they make a strong impression on just about any recruit that visits Clemson through the years. I mean, we've seen the success that Dabo and his staff have had in terms of landing top recruits. They've landed some top recruits from the state of Alabama, but as far as Peter Woods goes, it would, in my opinion, be the biggest surprise of the recruiting season if he ended up going to Clemson, just because this is a diehard Alabama fan. This is a guy who grew up always wanting to play for the Crimson Tide, been down there, great relationship with the coaching staff. Freddie Roach, not only his position coach, but has also been the lead recruiter. So that would be a big blow to Freddie Roach if Peter Woods left Alabama and went to Clemson. I just would be shocked if that happens, even though I know people on the Clemson side feel like he's going to end up at Clemson. But guess what? They felt the same way last year on Jeremiah Alexander after he took his official visit. I just don't see it happening. I think Peter Woods ends up at Alabama, and he's going to be committing on July the 8th.
Yeah, it would be big to keep both of these in-state guys in the state, especially Peter Woods. And like you said, Wilkin Formby in the city of Tuscaloosa. Peter Woods, like you said, a guy we've been talking about for quite some time. And, a lot of the guys that visited this past weekend heavily covered the recruiting for 2.5 years at this point. And, as we kind of zoom out, look at this weekend as a whole, who stood out to you? You had conversations with some of these guys. Who liked it the most, and who do you feel is the most comfortable with Alabama after the big official visit weekend?
Yeah, like I said, there was a lot of big names that were in Tuscaloosa. From Arch Manning to Richard Young, Caden Proctor, Francis Morogoa. There's just, so many guys that were in Tuscaloosa for official visits. And we had a chance to talk to a lot of the guys. I mean, we talked to Wilkin Formby about his visit. Talked to Olas Alinen, the 4-star Finnish lineman who's at boarding school in Connecticut. I still think that Alabama is in really good shape with him, but can they get somebody like Caden Proctor or Francis Morogoa on the commitment board? In my opinion, I think they have a better chance with Morogoa just because he's an IMG Academy lineman. He took his first visit to Alabama this past week and was absolutely blown away. He still has his other official visits to take and is going to enjoy that process. But I do think Alabama made up a lot of ground with Francis this past weekend. Now, Caden Proctor, he's an Iowa kid. Iowa has a lot of success producing NFL linemen, and he's visited the Hawkeyes just several times. Visited Alabama a couple times, including last summer, and then this past weekend for the official visit. They're in it. I think they're going to need to get him back on campus at least one more time, and we'll kind of see how all that unfolds. But another guy that I feel like Alabama made up a lot of ground with this past weekend was Raul Aguirre, the Rivals 100 linebacker out of Georgia. I had a chance to talk to him the other day, and just had an unbelievable trip to Tuscaloosa. Was really impressed with everything that Alabama has to offer. Said that this was a program that he feels like can help him develop as a man, as a player, and just really enjoyed the time that he spent around several of the Alabama players, including his player host for the weekend, who was Sean Murphy, who went through the recruiting process last year, one of the best linebackers in the country. So he had a great time, and Alabama is definitely a top contender for Raul after his visit to Tuscaloosa this past weekend. I do think Richard Young doesn't do any interviews. He likes to keep things pretty quiet, but from just talking to different people who are around Richard this past weekend, he is one of the best running backs in the country, one of the best players that Alabama has been going after for a long time. I think that Alabama is in the driver's seat heading into these last few visits for him. Currently at Notre Dame, he's visiting Georgia this weekend. He's already visited a couple other schools, so we'll see how things go. But as of right now, I do think that Alabama is in the driver's seat for Richard Young, and overall, just a great visit weekend. I guess the biggest question is, everyone wants to know is what's happening with Arch Manning, especially with Eli Holstein being on the Alabama commitment board. Does Alabama realistically have a chance? There's some Alabama fans that are probably watching the show tonight, wondering why do we still talk about Arch Manning? Because Alabama already has its quarterback in the recruiting class. Well, the reason we're talking about him still is because he's still visiting. He's still talking to Alabama on a very regular basis. He doesn't talk to the media, so we're not going to get a ton of, from him about the visit to Alabama. Now, he may speak to some media after his visit to Texas this weekend. He's already visited Georgia, so after he takes these 3 trips, might be a little bit more open to talking about all the visits. But from what we've heard, just from talking to people close to him, talking to people in Tuscaloosa, and people that were around Arch throughout the weekend, Alabama's still in this thing. And even though Alabama fans want to say it's over, I don't want to say that just yet. I think he wouldn't have visited Tuscaloosa if there wasn't any interest. And sure, everybody says, "Oh, it's a free trip to Alabama. You're all expense paid. Why not take the visit?" Well, why not take the visit somewhere else if you're not if you're not interested? Take a visit to Hawaii, take a visit to USC, go somewhere that that you're going to have a good time if you're not interested in the program. Um, I think that Alabama is a school that has informed Arch and Eli throughout the whole process that they do plan on taking two quarterbacks. Competition is going to be wide open after Bryce Young leaves. There's not a guaranteed starter after Bryce Young leaves Alabama, and I think that's kind of the message that they've been saying to Arch. I think his family really likes the championship culture in Tuscaloosa from top to bottom. It's not just Nick Saban. It's not just the assistant coaches. It's the strength staff. It's the nutrition staff. It's the medical staff. It's the training staff. It's the academic support staff. It's everybody that's involved at Alabama. That's what they like about Alabama. That's what really sells them on, why Alabama might be a great fit for Arch. And, they see the way that the Alabama recruits and the players that they have signed over the course of the last few years, the guys that are going to be around Arch for the next few years. So I wouldn't rule out Alabama just yet. Now, if I was making a prediction, would I predict Alabama? Probably not. But to say that they're not really a contender or that there's no chance that it's between Georgia and Texas only, that's just completely false. I think they're in it. I think they're going to be in it all the way until the end. Easily could go somewhere else. But Alabama is in contention for Arch Manning. And until we hear otherwise, we're going to keep talking about them and keep reporting the news. So we'll see how the visit goes to Texas this weekend. See if if he gets ready to make a decision, possibly before the start of the season, which is very, very likely, especially after taking these official visits this month. So we'll see how it all unfolds for Arch. But guess what, guys? We're still talking about him. We're going to talk about him until we hear that Alabama's out of the running for him.
Guys, hit that like button for Arch Manning. Bone, so many great points made there. And something I think is really important, he's not taking trips to Alabama just to take a trip to Alabama. If that was the case, like you said, he'd be with Mario Cristobal in Miami, maybe out there visiting Grand Canyon University or something like that. Arch Manning is still interested in Alabama. And I think you feel more than content with Eli Holstein, already committed to the class, but going to be fun to follow the biggest recruit maybe in the history of recruiting. And guys, be sure to get in the comments as we get through the show here as well. Let us know what you think about Arch Manning, where you think he's going to end up if it is not Alabama, and all of the rest of these recruits we've talked about so far. And not to get too specific here, as we kind of continue to recap official visit weekend of June the 10th, who are some guys you think that visited this past week and that have the best chance to sign with Alabama? Who really stood out to you?
Well, I do think, you have to look at the linemen. As big of a priority as the offensive line is in this class, Alabama had 4 of their top offensive linemen on campus this past weekend. I think Alabama gets at least 2 of them, with Ola Salinan, Wilkin Formby being the most likely. Now, I just have to think that there's a great chance for them to land at least one between Caden Proctor and Francis Mauigoa. I think they get one of those guys. I'm not sure which one just yet. I want to kind of let things really play out. I think they, like I said earlier, I think they really made up a lot of ground with Francis this past weekend. Now with Proctor, I'm just not sure when he's going to make that decision. I think he's probably going to wait it out maybe until a little bit in the fall, because he does have an official visit planned for Michigan in, I think, in the first week of September. So he may stretch it out. Perhaps might go to a few games this season, maybe get back down to Tuscaloosa before making that commitment. But they're certainly, a strong contender there. Richard Young, as I said earlier, I think they've got a great chance to land him. I would predict Alabama for Richard Young right now. Raul Aguirre, I think that they really made up a lot of ground with him this weekend, because I would have put them probably 3rd or 4th on the list before the weekend. I think they're probably in that top 2 group right now. So anytime you're in that, top 2, I think that you're going to have a really good chance to potentially land that guy. And Coach Saban really wants him as a part of its class. So we'll see, over the course of the next few weeks after his remaining visits. I know he's going up to Ohio State, and so let's kind of see how that visit goes, and then try to make a decision on, or try to make a final prediction on where he's going to end up going to school. But those are probably the main guys right there out of the officials. Some just, Jacoby Johnson was another guy who was in town this weekend. Yeah, I think he ends up staying in state. He's an Oklahoma kid. I think he ends up staying in Oklahoma. But Alabama is a contender. But those are kind of the main ones that I feel like Alabama's going to have a chance to sign.
A big weekend. Fun to follow on Twitter and to follow where we could. Guys, if you were not following it on Twitter, you're going to want to do that in the future. And you can do that by following Andrew at Andrew J. Bone. Bone, as we talk about offers, there's one that gets me excited. I love seeing kickers get the spotlight here, in a 2023 kicker in Peyton Woodring was offered this past weekend. Do you expect him to commit with the Crimson Tide?
I do. This is the one guy that Alabama decided to offer after camp. We talked about this last week. We said that Alabama was expecting at least 9 of their top 10 kickers that they had identified on the board coming in for camp this weekend. This past weekend, we certainly expected Alabama to extend an offer, and they did so. And they did that on Monday after they evaluated all the film. Now, they were already high on Peyton, on Saturday, and I think they could have easily offered Peyton a scholarship on Saturday, but wanted to do just a little bit more due diligence, make sure that they're making the right decision, because you offer a kicker, especially offering a kicker that may not have a ton of other offers. You want to make sure that you're offering the right guy, because that guy's probably going to commit to your program. Woodring was great on Saturday at Alabama's kicking camp. Did really well as far as field goals, kickoffs. Had a great junior season. And this is a guy that Alabama, out of all the guys that kicked at their camp, this is the guy that they decided to extend an offer to. We had a chance to talk to Peyton the other day after his after receiving the offer from Alabama. Extremely excited about it. Plans on making a decision sometime soon. Now, he's gone to some other camps, been to Georgia, Florida State, and it's kind of waiting to hear back from those guys and if they're going to extend him an offer. But as of right now, I think Alabama's in very, very good position with Peyton Woodring, and be surprised if he's not the kicker in Alabama's class.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. Always fun, like I said, to follow these kickers. Peyton Woodring, the next to get an offer for Alabama. And as we talk about official visits this past weekend, got to talk about how they will roll in now this week as well. JUCO wide receiver Malik Benson begins his official visit today. That will go through Friday. Talk about Benson and what the Tide needs to do to secure a commitment.
Well, this is a guy that they have recruited for quite a while. I received an offer from Alabama earlier in the spring, and they've really turned up the heat on him over the course of the last few months. Now, this is going to be his first visit to Alabama. I know he's extremely excited about it. Had a chance to talk to him a couple weeks ago, and this is a school that he grew up really liking, and Alabama was the favorite a few months ago, but with all the attention that he's received, the visits that he's taken, visited Tennessee this past weekend after coming back from Knoxville, said that Tennessee was his leader, but now he's making that trip to Alabama, where you can make the argument that as far as wide receiver development, best school in the country. So they're going to have Malik on campus today through Friday, and they're really going to be pushing hard for him. This is a guy that they really want to add. He's a December enrollee, or a January enrollee. Will graduate in December, and I think Alabama's going to have a really strong chance. Like I said, this is his first visit to Alabama, so just because Tennessee was the favorite after the weekend visit to Knoxville, we'll see how things go in Tuscaloosa this week. I think they're going to have a really good chance to potentially pull him away from the Vols. So we'll see. We'll talk to Malik after his visit's over and see where he stands.
Yeah, out of Hutchinson, Kansas there. Some recency bias with the Volunteers. Hope to see the same thing this week at Alabama. And it rolls into the weekend as well. More official visits, big-time visits. Cormani McClain, Caleb Downs, Justice Haynes, all guys that we've talked about for a while. A couple of Georgia guys there as well. And, Samson Okololo. Talk about these visits coming up this weekend, who you're most excited to see, hear from, and what Alabama needs to do to land some more commitments.
Well, yeah, I think with Alabama, you got to be excited about Caleb Downs coming to Tuscaloosa, top safety in the country, on the heels of Minkah Fitzpatrick, landing the highest paid salary in NFL history at the safety position. I mean, that's something that you can certainly use when you're recruiting somebody like Caleb Downs. But a lot of big names coming into town. I mean, you mentioned several of those guys right there: Caleb Downs, Justice Haynes, who's the top running back in the country. Samson Okaluna, who's also going to be in town, 5-star offensive lineman from Massachusetts. He's not the only Massachusetts guy that's going to be in town. Ronan Hannafin, who's a 4-star athlete out of the Boston area, is going to be in Tuscaloosa. This is a very unique athlete. Plays on both sides of the football. Alabama's recruiting him mainly as a linebacker, but this is going to be his second trip with the Crimson Tide. So a lot of interest from Ronan Hannafin. You're going to have Shelton Sampson, who is one of the best wide receivers in the country from Louisiana. Up in town country, also going to, from the state of Florida, that are going to be in Tuscaloosa. Damon Wilson, one of the best pass rushers out of Venice, Florida, teammates with current Alabama commitment, Elliott Washington. Jelani Thurman, who is a tight end from the state of Georgia, also going to make a official visit to Alabama this weekend. So it is a absolutely loaded weekend. Once again, just a lot of big names that are going to be in town. I wouldn't be surprised if we add a couple more guys to the growing list of officials this weekend. So, really excited to see kind of how things unfold. And I think as far as who I'm interested to hear from. I'm really interested to hear from guys who haven't visited Alabama in the past. So Samson Okaluna, the 5-star offensive tackle, and we've talked about all these guys, all these other guys that have come through over the course of the last few weeks. All these big offensive linemen. This is one of the best offensive linemen in the country. So will Alabama potentially become a strong contender in his recruitment? I think they're going to have a really good chance. Cormani McClain, 5-star, defensive back, cornerback, number 2 overall player in the country, according to Rivals. This is why Travaris Robinson, Coach T-Rob, was brought in to land. These big name guys from the state of Florida. From especially a guy like Cormani. I mean, it doesn't get much better than him. So this is a premier target for T-Rob. Can he potentially secure the deal with Cormani McClain, who many people expect will end up at Florida because of the connections there, but I still think that Alabama is going to have a really strong chance, and I think they are in that top 2 with Cormani right now. So can they potentially move ahead of the Gators after this weekend? I think they're going to have a really strong chance. So big weekend for a lot of these guys that are going to be coming into Tuscaloosa. Obviously, we'll try to have as much content as possible from the weekend, regardless of if it's interviews or nuggets or scoop, whatever it may be. We'll be sure to have it on our site on BamaInsider.com.
Well, and you have to promise me you're going to get at least an hour, 2 hours of sleep this weekend. I know it's been a crazy couple of weeks. So, guys, be sure to stay in the know, stay with that coverage at Andrew J. Bone on Twitter. And, guys, go to Bama Insider as well to check all of that out. As we kind of wrap it up tonight, Bone, zooming out again here, kind of name 4 or 5 guys that have really stood out to you so far through summer camps, through visits, things you've heard. What's been kind of the best highlights so far in this crazy summer?
I think anytime you go into the summer, that there's a lot of unknowns. Because there's going to be a lot of kids that are going to show up to camp that you weren't previously recruiting, or maybe you got some highlights on, and you still wanted to see them in camp, and you want to see them come in, work out, and compete. I think we've seen some guys that have kind of come out of nowhere and earned offers from Alabama. Brayson Hubbard out of Ocean Springs, Mississippi. This is a guy who not even ranked, didn't have any big offers, never played safety before, been a quarterback at his high school, attended Alabama's camp a couple of weeks ago, and just balled out. They put him at safety. They weren't recruiting. Alabama wasn't recruiting him as a quarterback, even though that's what he's ranked as or listed as. I don't even think he's ranked, but he worked out at safety. They ran a 4.50 in the 40 multiple times. Listen, if you're a high school football recruit, your high school coach, your dad, your trainer may be out there telling you that you run a 4.3, that you run a 4.4, and you go to Alabama's camp and you guess what? You find out that you run a 4.65 or you run a 4.7. Going to an actual camp in Tuscaloosa, or one of these premier programs in the country, they're actually going to get your actual 40-yard dash time. So running a 4.50 in Tuscaloosa, it's hard to do. And this is a guy that ran it, worked out at safety for the first time ever, and was one of the best performers overall in the Tides camp. So they were really excited about Brayson Hubbard. And I think this is certainly a guy that is going to move up the recruiting board. Has moved up the recruiting board and has a committable offer. This guy can call Alabama. He is not ranked on Rivals. I don't know if he's ranked on other sites. He's not ranked, but this guy can call up Nick Saban right now, commit, and Alabama will be absolutely floored to have him on board. That's how much they think of Brayson Hubbard. We talked about Peyton Woodring earlier, earning an offer from Alabama. Jaron Hamilton is a guy that I am really intrigued to learn more information on. He received an offer from the Crimson Tide today, wide receiver. Had a really good showing in the Tides camp today, and I always try to find out. We see all these different offers that get extended, and some of them are, you kind of have to be in line. You've got an offer, but there might be 5 or 6 guys that have yet to commit. We're going to wait on those guys to make their decisions before you can jump on board. And that's happened a few times already this summer. But Jaron Hamilton balled out at Alabama's camp on Wednesday morning, received a committable offer from the Crimson Tide. So we're going to be watching Jaron Hamilton pretty closely over the course of the next however long it takes before he makes a decision. This is a guy that Alabama fans can start knowing a little bit more about. Raymond Polito is another name that we've heard a lot about. He's an offensive lineman out of California. Actually recruited, he's a big dude. He's 6'6". I think he weighed in at about 340 pounds at the Tides camp. Alabama was recruiting him as a guard. They really liked him a lot. Performed really well in the Tides camp. Not highly ranked. He's a 4-star, so you got a couple more stars than Brayson Hubbard does. But this is a guy that I think is going to come back for an official visit to Alabama. Definitely a guy that Tide fans can start paying a little bit more attention to over the course of the next several months. But definitely heard a lot of good things about Raymond Polito's performance. And then another guy I'll mention, and we talked about him a couple weeks ago, Justin Jefferson, JUCO linebacker out of Pearl River, had one of the best showings at Alabama's camp this summer of anybody, and definitely a top priority target for the Crimson Tide. So those are some of the new names that I know. There's a few other guys that we've mentioned on Bama Insider over the course of the last few weeks, but just giving you guys a little bit of a taste on some of the names that we've heard some great things about over the course of the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it really has been a fun summer so far. Big weekend this past weekend, of course, a massive weekend coming up here again as we get into the middle of June. I know it's been hot over there in Alabama. I'm a little bit further east right now, Bone, thankfully avoiding some of that heat. But, as we kind of close it out tonight, talk about what you're expecting this weekend and, what you're looking forward to the most as we close it out here in the month of June.
Well, I think what, we can be looking forward to is, the first big commitment as far as summer commitment that we're going to be watching. Will Conform be announcing his decision on Monday. But as far as the official visits go, I'm really intrigued to hear what Malik Benson has to say after his couple of days in Tuscaloosa this week. Obviously, a lot of big names coming into town, and I think there's some ground to make up. Especially with the out-of-state guys and how things go with the defensive backs from Florida like Makari Vickers and Damari Brown and Cormani McClain, and obviously Caleb Downs coming in from Georgia. I mean, there's just so much information that we don't know right now. We've learned a lot from the first couple weeks. We've kind of learned where things stand with a lot of these guys. A lot of the official visitors have come through, guys that we feel like Alabama's got a strong chance to land, and some that we, wouldn't make a prediction for Alabama right now. So once we kind of get through this weekend, see kind of where things stand with a lot of these guys, I think that's kind of the exciting part, to really know where things stand in their recruitment, and who Alabama fans should continue to follow moving forward as a lot of these guys get prepared to making their decisions.
Guys, be sure to hit the like button, ding that bell, subscribe to the channel so you can know when those guys do make their decisions. Like you said, Bone, going to be a really fun weekend, and we'll know so much more the next time we meet up here for Alabama football recruiting. Until then, guys, one more time for you, at Andrew J. Bone on Twitter. Be sure to give him a follow, always tweeting. You're going to want to turn his bell on as well. Get the notifications there. A lot of great stuff. And guys, one more time for me, hit that like button. We're going to try to get this video up to 500 likes. Help our YouTube channel grow. For Andrew Bone, my name is Trey Yanity. The second massive weekend in June coming up this weekend. Until then, guys, have a great night and roll Tide.